Black young girl fixes businessman's car, but the ring on her finger exposes a buried secret. The sun burned low over the cracked edge of Upland County, casting long shadows over dirt roads and weather-worn fences. You could smell engine oil in the air, hear the soft rustle of cornfields on either side, and feel the kind of heat that made the asphalt bubble like it was angry at being walked on. 12-year-old Zuri Thomas walked home with her backpack swinging behind her, one strap half torn from years of patchwork repairs. Her sneakers, mismatched and faded, scuffed against the gravel as she hummed an old jazz tune her grandmother used to play. She always walked the back roads after school. They were quieter, and Zuri preferred the sound of crickets over the noise of city-bound traffic. But this afternoon, something unusual stopped her. Up ahead, parked half-slanted on the roadside, was a sleek silver BMW with its hood popped open like a wounded animal. And next to it stood a tall man in business slacks, jacket tossed over the side mirror, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried, "I don't care what the tow company says. I need to be in Atlanta by 7. I'm not missing this meeting." He paused to check his watch, a thick, shiny thing that probably cost more than her uncle's whole workshop. Zuri slowed her pace. She had been raised on caution. Her mama always told her, "Don't go near folks who look like they can buy your silence." But this wasn't just curiosity. It was instinct. The way the man shook his head and stared under the hood with zero understanding reminded her of her Uncle Jay's usual clients. All suit, no socket wrench. She stepped a little closer, cautiously. "You all right, sir?" The man turned, blinking as if startled someone was out there. His eyes swept her up and down. A black girl, hair in thick twists, grease stains on her fingers, wearing a shirt 2 sizes too big with the words Jay's Garage printed in faded red. "I'm good," he said tightly. "Just waiting on help." Zuri looked under the hood. The problem screamed at her instantly. A busted coolant pipe, steaming softly in the Georgia heat. But she didn't say anything at first. She'd learned not to offer help unless someone asked, especially when it came to men like him. But the man sighed and rubbed his temples. "This car's only 6 months old," he muttered, mostly to himself. Zuri cleared her throat. "That leak's gonna cost you a radiator if you keep it running." He glanced at her again, skeptical. "You know cars?" She shrugged. "My uncle's a mechanic. I've been fixing things since I was tall enough to hold a wrench." The man looked at the road, then his watch again. After a pause, he said, "You think you can fix it?" Zuri stepped closer. "I can patch it. You'll make it to town. But you'll need a real replacement soon." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. Name's Charles. Charles Langston." She set her bag down and pulled out a small tool roll, the same one her uncle had given her last year when she fixed the church van's brake line all by herself. With practiced movements, she slid under the hood, working in silence. Charles Langston watched her, puzzled. She didn't just know what she was doing. She moved like she belonged under that hood, like it spoke a language she understood. As she wiped her brow, he noticed it. A ring on her finger, too big for her hand, tied with thin thread at the base to keep it from sliding off. It was antique, gold with a small red gem at its center, shaped like a flame. Charles blinked. That ring. His mouth went dry. He'd seen that exact design once in a vault. Years ago, before things went wrong. Before the silence. The cover-ups. The scandal that forced a retirement no one dared speak about. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Zuri didn't look up. "It was my mom's. She passed 2 years ago. It's the only thing I got left that was hers." A pause hung between them like heavy smoke. "What was her name?" "Celeste Thomas," Zuri said without emotion. "But I don't think you knew her. She wasn't anyone rich or famous." Charles felt the color drain from his face. He did know the name Celeste. Barely. A whistleblower. An engineer. And the woman who vanished after filing a sealed lawsuit against the Langston Corporation. A lawsuit that was never brought to court. He never met her face to face, but he had heard enough to know she was dangerous. Not because she wanted to be, but because she knew too much. "Finished," Zuri said, wiping her hands. I patched the pipe and sealed the leak. Just pour in some water and go easy. It'll hold for about 30 miles. He stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. You sure your mama's name was Celeste Thomas? Zuri looked at him now, guarded. Yeah. Why? Charles forced a smile. No reason. Just reminded me of someone. She narrowed her eyes. You said your name was Langston. You the same Langston from Langston Biotech? He froze. Used to be. Why? My mom used to work there. Said they did something bad. But she never told me what. Charles opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He handed her a card. If you ever need help, ever, call me. Zuri took the card slowly. Thanks, I guess, she said. But I don't need help. I just fix things. As she turned to leave, Charles stood still, staring at the ring that shimmered one last time in the sunlight. Zuri walked home with a strange weight in her chest. She'd patched up a dozen engines in the past year. Strangers broke down near Upland County more often than you'd think. Lost tourists, delivery vans, the occasional city commuter taking a shortcut. But this Charles Langston, he felt different. Not just the way he looked at her, but the way he looked at the ring. She slipped it off once she got home and stared at it under the bare bulb above her work table. The gemstone shimmered red-orange in the light, like fire trapped inside a crystal. Her mother, Celeste, had always told her, "This ring's got more stories than I could ever tell you. One day they'll find you, and when they do, don't run." Zuri had never understood what she meant. Until now. She tucked the ring into a hidden pocket in her backpack and went to help Uncle Jay finish repairs on a customer's truck. But 3 towns over, Charles Langston wasn't sleeping. He sat in a penthouse suite overlooking Atlanta's skyline, drink untouched, laptop open with a dozen windows running in the background. Celeste Thomas. It had been nearly 13 years since she disappeared. A chemical engineer hired to work on Langston Biotech's proprietary serum for neural enhancement. The trials were internal, secret, off books. Celeste had been one of the only black women in the department, a junior scientist but brilliant. She discovered discrepancies in the testing reports. Data that showed certain compounds could cause long-term neurological damage in minors. The serum, they claimed, was to help accelerate cognitive learning in children with developmental delays. But the real plan was more sinister. They wanted smarter soldiers, faster learners, more efficient workers, children as assets, quiet obedience, no rebellion. Celeste threatened to go public. Within 3 weeks, her badge was deactivated, her apartment cleaned out, and the documents she filed for whistleblower protection vanished in bureaucratic errors. No charges, no investigation, but she'd gotten away. And now her daughter was standing in the middle of a Georgia highway, wearing the ring that Langston Labs had designed themselves as part of a prototype ID system for test subjects. The rings were never supposed to leave the lab. Yet here it was, on the hand of a black child who fixed cars like she could read the engine's thoughts. Charles opened a locked folder on his laptop and pulled up a file labeled Project Halo. Inside, grainy footage of Celeste and a child. A baby maybe a year old. Dates. Data points. Psychological observations. There were over a dozen files like this, but only one had the word, escaped, stamped across it in red. Zuri Thomas. Back in Upland. Zuri lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her Auntie Rhea entered, gently setting a folded blanket on the end of her bed. "You ain't usually this quiet, baby." Zuri sat up slowly. "Auntie, did Mama ever work in Atlanta?" Rhea stiffened. "What makes you ask that?" "I met a man today. His car broke down. He looked at Mama's ring like it burned him." A long pause filled the air between them. "Zuri, your Mama was brilliant. Smart like nobody's business. She used to build things for companies she didn't trust. But she needed the money. After you were born, things got worse." Rhea sat beside her. "One night, she showed up here holding you in one hand and a backpack in the other. Said she was being watched. Said she had to vanish. She left a note. Told us to raise you like one of ours. And to never let that ring leave your hand." "Why?" Zuri asked, her voice cracking. Because it's not just jewelry, baby. It's proof. Zuri reached into her backpack, pulled out the ring, and stared. Proof of what? Charles made a call the next morning. Dr. Kerwin, he said once the man answered. We have a problem. Still chasing ghosts? The voice replied with a yawn. She's alive. A pause. The Thomas girl? Yes. She's in Georgia. How old? 12. Maybe 13. Abilities? She fixed a coolant system in less than 5 minutes. Diagnosed it like a mechanic with 20 years experience. Another pause. We need to retrieve her. Not yet, Charles said. Let me try another approach first. That same day, Zuri arrived at school and noticed something odd. A sleek black SUV parked across the street. 2 men in suits inside. Windows tinted. Unmoving. She saw them again at lunch. Then again near the basketball court after school. That night, her uncle's phone rang. He listened for a moment, nodded, and then locked every door in the house. Zuri, he said softly, we need to talk. He led her to the basement, a place she'd never been allowed to explore. Inside were boxes sealed, dust-covered, untouched. Her uncle opened one and pulled out a thick folder. These were your mother's. Zuri opened the folder. Lab reports, schematics, chemical formulas, confidential memos from Langston Labs. One page had a black and white image of the ring, the same ring she wore now. She kept these here? Zuri whispered. She said someone would come for you one day, and when they did, you'd have to finish what she started. Jay reached into the folder and pulled out a flash drive. She said this drive was everything. Zuri stared at it. What is it? Proof that they experimented on kids. That the program was real. That Langston Labs erased people. A sound outside the house made them both freeze. Car tires. Multiple. Jay reached for the shotgun by the basement door. Stay here, he said. Don't come up until I say. Zuri crouched in the corner of the basement, the flashlight flickering above her head. The flash drive rested in her palm, still warm from her uncle's hand. Upstairs, she heard footsteps, deliberate, heavy. Not her uncle's. There were voices too, low, muffled, tense. She couldn't make out words, but something in their tone froze her blood. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to take something. Her. The old vent behind her workbench groaned as she twisted it open, just like Uncle Jay had shown her when she was younger. A game back then, a hiding spot for cookies. Now it was life or death. Zuri climbed in, pulling the metal grate closed behind her. Dust stung her nose. Her heart beat like a hammer. A door slammed upstairs. Where is she? A man barked. I told you, Jay said, his voice steady. You've got the wrong house. We traced the signature from the ring. She accessed something. Zuri's breath caught. We just want the girl. I said. There was a scuffle. A grunt. A crash. Zuri's fists clenched. Then a voice she hadn't heard in years rang out through the vent. She's not yours. It was Aunt Rhea. 10 minutes later, silence returned. The men were gone. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. A lamp lay shattered on the floor. Zuri crept out of the vent and found her aunt kneeling beside Uncle Jay, blood on his shirt, but breathing. He'll be okay, Rhea whispered, helping him sit. Just a cracked rib. I got one of them good with the poker. Zuri's voice shook. They knew about the ring. Jay nodded, wincing. They're not stopping, baby girl. Not until they wipe every trace of what your mama uncovered. We need help, Zuri said. Rhea reached into a drawer and pulled out a dusty envelope. I was hoping we'd never have to use this. Inside was a name and a number. Malik Hart, Atlanta Free Press. The next day, Zuri rode a bus to Atlanta, the flash drive hidden deep in her shoe. She sat in the very back, hoodie pulled over her braids, eyes scanning every passenger that got on. When she stepped off the bus downtown, the city rose around her like a kingdom of glass and noise. She moved fast through the crowd, every sound making her flinch. Hart's office was on the 4th floor of a fading brick building that smelled like paper and ink. The plaque on the door read, Investigative Unit Truth doesn't hide forever. She knocked twice. A tall black man with salt and pepper locks opened the door, his eyes narrowing. "You're the girl." "I'm Zuri Thomas," she said. "My mom was Celeste. I have what she left behind." Malik Hart hadn't heard the name Celeste Thomas in a decade. But the moment Zuri handed him the flash drive and showed him the ring, he moved like a man who'd been waiting for this day. He plugged the drive into his encrypted laptop and stared as files began opening. Documents, emails, audio recordings, and more. "Dear God," he muttered. One folder was labeled Trial 17, Neural Acceleration Subjects. Inside were photos of children, boys and girls of color, all under 12. Their names were replaced with numbers. Zuri recognized one face, a boy named Terrence who used to come to her mama's apartment years ago. Malik sat back, stunned. This is enough to burn Langston Labs to the ground. Then why hasn't anyone done it before? He looked at her. Because they buried it deep. And the last person who tried vanished. Not this time, Zuri said. We go public. Malik hesitated. If we push this story, they'll come for you harder than ever. And maybe for anyone who helps. Zuri clenched her fists. They already came. To my home. They hurt my family. I'm not hiding anymore. Malik leaned forward, inspired by the girl's defiance. Okay, then we don't just leak it. He pulled out a recorder. We build a case. We take down the whole empire. Meanwhile, Charles Langston was sitting in his office in a high-rise tower, reading a report from his private security contractor. Subject located. Escaped again. She's working with a journalist. He scrolled down to a photo, grainy, but unmistakably Zuri. A younger intern stepped in nervously. Mr. Langston, should I cancel the investor dinner tonight? Charles didn't answer at first. Then he smiled. No, let them eat. He opened a secure comm line. Deploy Unit 4. Sweep the Atlanta Free Press offices. I want that drive and the girl. Back at the Free Press, Malik and Zuri had worked for hours organizing the files, building timelines, connecting whistleblower complaints to silent settlements. The deeper they went, the uglier it became. Untested formulas, secret test facilities, and a pattern of targeting underprivileged black and brown communities. It was never just about science. It was about control. Oppression disguised as innovation. This story, Malik said, is going to change everything. But even as he spoke the words, the lights in the building flickered. Zuri's head snapped up. Did you see that? Malik nodded. Backup systems. Probably. A sound. A click at the door. Zuri grabbed the flash drive and dove behind the couch. Malik stood, facing the door just as it burst open. Two masked men rushed in, armed and silent. Zuri held her breath as Malik tried to block them, shouting, "She's not here!" But they didn't believe him. One began ransacking the room. The other shoved Malik aside and went straight for the computer. Zuri crawled quietly across the floor and into the supply closet. She pulled her phone and sent a single message to Aunt Rhea. It's happening. Tell Jay. She looked at the flash drive in her hand and knew what she had to do. The supply closet was dark and cramped, the air thick with chemical fumes and fear. Zuri crouched beside a broken printer and tried to steady her breathing. Every creak in the floorboards outside made her fingers tighten around the flash drive. They were tearing the office apart, shouting, crashing. She heard Malik's voice, defiant, angry. Then a loud thud. Silence. Zuri clamped a hand over her mouth. Her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid they'd hear it. She knew hiding wasn't enough now, not when they'd found her. Not when they had the power to silence entire newsrooms. Her fingers brushed over the ring on her middle finger, still warm, still glowing faintly in the dark. That's when she remembered. Her mom used to whisper stories when she was little, about how the ring wasn't just a keepsake. It was a key, not metaphorically, literally. Zuri pulled it off and held it close. In the faint light, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A tiny seam around the edge of the gem. Her mother had told her once, Fire holds memory. You just have to ignite it. She twisted the ring slightly, and with a soft click, the gem popped open. Inside, barely visible, was a microchip no bigger than a fingernail. Not just proof, access. She shoved the flash drive and chip deep into her sock, took a deep breath, and crept out of the closet. The office was in ruins. Malik was slumped in a chair, blood dripping from his brow but still conscious. One of the attackers was yelling into a radio. "We didn't find it. The drive's gone." The other was dragging a desktop tower toward the exit. Zuri waited until they were both turned away, then slipped past the broken door and ran. She didn't stop running until she reached the train station. She had no plan, just instinct: move, disappear, survive. At a nearby kiosk, she used a prepaid card her uncle had slipped in her backpack long ago. "Just in case," he'd said. She bought a ticket to Savannah, a few hours away. On the train, she sat near the back and kept her hoodie low. In her pocket, the ring felt heavier than ever. That night, Charles Langston stood in the Langston Labs war room. Multiple monitors displayed real-time GPS grids, intercepted messages, security camera footage. "She got away again?" he asked his security chief. "She knew what to do," the man replied. "Your son is looking into the ring design. He says it's activated." Charles's jaw tightened. "Track her. Do whatever it takes." In Savannah, Zuri found a small motel just off the highway. The woman at the front desk looked her up and down. Alone, dusty, obviously running, and said nothing. Just handed her a key. Inside the tiny room, Zuri peeled off her shoes, locked the door, and sat on the bed. She pulled out her laptop, a battered second-hand Dell, and connected the flash drive. Files opened instantly, but one folder wouldn't load. It was encrypted. She inserted the microchip into the USB port using a small adapter. A soft beep, then it opened. Zuri leaned forward, her mouth falling open. Inside were thousands of documents. Not just research contracts, names of investors, paid-off government officials, signed memos from Charles Langston himself, outlining the full scope of Project Apex. What made her stomach twist was a hidden video file, labeled Subject 17, Phase 3 Evaluation. She clicked. A lab. White walls. Cold. Sterile. A toddler, no more than 3, sitting alone on a metal bench. Eyes wide, expression vacant. A voice off screen. "This one's different. Repairs toys instinctively. Rebuilds circuits without instruction." Another voice. "Mother filed a complaint last week. Said she's withdrawing the child." "Then eliminate the complaint." Zuri slammed the laptop shut. The child in the video was her. She called Aunt Rhea immediately. "Zuri? Baby, where are you?" "I'm in Savannah. I have everything. The chip, the files, all of it. I was in that lab, Auntie." A heavy silence on the line. Rhea's voice cracked. "Your mama tried to get you out before they finished their tests. She risked everything. That ring. It was the only way to protect you." "What do I do with all this?" Zuri asked, her voice shaking. "You burn them down," Rhea whispered. "But do it smart." The next morning, Zuri walked into a small black-owned tech cafe in downtown Savannah. It was called The Socket, and her mom used to bring her there once when she was a baby. A place full of coders, hackers, and old-school activists with tech knowledge and a distrust of corporate power. She asked for the owner, Amira Jennings. Amira, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with natural hair tied up in a colorful wrap, listened to Zuri's story in stunned silence. Then, without saying a word, she locked the door and led her to a back room filled with servers, routers, and encrypted towers. "You want the world to see what Langston did?" Amira asked. Zuri nodded. "I want them to pay. Then we do this right. Distributed servers. Multi-platform leak. Open source exposure." Zuri stared at her. "You're not scared." Amira smiled. "Girl, fear's what keeps change from happening. You're not the first kid they tried to use, but you're the first one they couldn't silence." That night, in a secure room beneath the cafe, Zuri and Amira uploaded every file to dozens of online watchdog groups, journalistic collectives, and independent legal teams. Within minutes, the files were mirrored across Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, and a website Amira titled Ring of Fire. The children Langston tried to erase. And the views exploded. Within hours, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Project Apex. Hashtag Zuri exposed them. Hashtag Langston Secrets. By morning, the stock for Langston Labs had plummeted. Malik Hart, alive and recovering, appeared on a live stream with bandages on his head and fire in his voice. He confirmed everything. Zuri's name became known nationwide. The girl who'd fixed a car and, in doing so, broke a billion-dollar lie. But the danger wasn't over. A black SUV pulled into a dark alley behind the cafe. Inside, Charles Langston. Beside him, a man in full tactical gear. "She's made us public enemy number one." Langston's voice was cold. "Then we do what we should have done 13 years ago." By the next day, Zuri was everywhere. Her name was on news tickers, podcasts, TikToks, and headlines across the country. Young black girl exposes Langston Labs' darkest secret. Interviews were requested. Lawsuits were drafted. Protests erupted outside Langston's corporate headquarters in Boston and Atlanta. But Zuri? She was exhausted. She sat in the back room of the socket, her hoodie pulled over her face, laptop still open. She hadn't slept. The messages from other kids had started pouring in. Some sent photos. Some sent voice notes. Others just wrote, "I thought I was crazy. Now I know I wasn't alone." They were other subjects. Survivors. Children like her. Kids with odd gifts. One who could remember entire books after reading them once. Another who repaired broken phones by touch. One boy claimed he could disassemble engines blindfolded. Langston hadn't tested one child. They had tested hundreds. Meanwhile, Charles Langston watched it all unfold from his luxury estate outside Boston. The fires were spreading news, legal teams, congressional letters. There was even a petition to seize Langston Labs under emergency ethics violations. But Charles didn't look afraid. He looked calm. "Let the media rage," he told his private security officer. "Let the country burn. We'll survive this, unless she reveals the last part." The officer glanced at him. "The prototype?" Charles nodded. The ring wasn't just an identifier. It was the failsafe. Celeste encoded something in it. A database. The backup. The proof. Back in Savannah, Zuri opened another hidden file Amira had cracked open from the chip in the ring. Inside, maps, coordinates, and personnel records from a place called Site 4, Meridian Compound, a secret research center 2 hours outside Atlanta. Most of it had been redacted, but one line stood out in red. Subject 27, relocated, disappeared. No further data. Potential link to Subject 17. Zuri stared at the screen. Her hand trembled. Amira leaned over her shoulder. "You think that's a sibling?" Zuri whispered. "They never told me, but I always felt something." She stood. "I'm going to that compound." Amira blinked. "Are you out of your mind?" "No. I'm done running. I started this by fixing something on the side of the road. But now, I have to finish what my mother started." That night, Zuri and Amira drove toward the location marked on the map. They stayed off the main roads, avoiding cameras, tracking devices, and every possible trace. But Zuri knew deep down that Langston would be ahead of them. As they pulled up to a rusted fence outside the coordinates, two things happened at once. First, they saw the compound. Abandoned buildings, broken floodlights, surveillance towers that now housed nothing but birds. Second, Zuri's ring began to glow. A soft red shimmer pulsed at her finger. Amira stopped walking. "What the?" Zuri stepped closer to the fence. The ring pulsed faster. "It's reacting to something," she said. There was a keypad by a metal gate. Burnt out. But when Zuri touched her ring to the lock, click, the gate opened. They walked through the dead compound in silence. Zuri felt it in her bones. This place had once held children like her. They entered a concrete bunker in the center of the facility. The lights flickered on. Inside were rows of pods. Long powered down. Dust on glass. files strewn on counters. Then a sound. A cough. From the far corner. Zuri and Amira froze. A boy, maybe 13, sat curled on a mattress, weak but conscious. His eyes met Zuri's. "I know you," he rasped. "You were in the videos." I thought I was dreaming." Amira knelt beside him. "How long have you been here?" "I don't know. I was in a different place. They brought me here 2 years ago when the protests started. Said I was dangerous. They left me when the leak started. They thought it was too risky to move me." Zuri knelt beside him. "What's your name?" "Micah." Zuri's voice trembled. "Do you remember Celeste Thomas?" Micah blinked. "She was my mom's friend," she said. "She said she had a daughter like me." Zuri swallowed. "You're my brother." Outside the compound, the headlights of a black SUV flared to life. Langston's men had arrived. Amira peeked through a broken window. "We're boxed in." Zuri helped Micah stand. "We're getting out. I don't care what it takes." She turned to Amira. "Is the live stream link still active?" Amira nodded. "Always." "Good." Zuri pulled out her phone and opened the camera app. She pressed go live. Across the country, thousands of subscribers were notified. Zuri Thomas is live. The video feed started with her face, sweat on her brow, eyes burning with fury. Then she panned the camera to the boy beside her. "This is Micah. He's not a theory. He's not an exaggeration. He's my brother. He was held at Site 4, left to die. Langston Labs didn't just test kids. They buried them when they became inconvenient." She held the ring up to the camera. "This was their symbol. Now it's their evidence." Gunshots rang outside. The viewers heard it. The live stream spiked. Comments flooded in. "Call the police. This is insane. Protect her." At that moment, federal agents were already mobilizing. The live stream had reached more than the public. It had reached whistleblower watchdogs, investigative units, and even Langston Labs shareholders. Langston's name was officially toxic. Inside the bunker, Amira used an old elevator shaft to sneak Zuri, Micah, and herself through the basement tunnels, a smuggler's path once used by black site janitors. They emerged 2 miles away in a drainage field and disappeared into the trees before Langston's men even breached the building. As dawn broke, the nation awoke to the truth. Not just about Project Apex, but about the courage of 2 children who wouldn't be broken, and a ring that became a flame. The courtroom was overflowing. Journalists elbowed for space in the back rows. Activists and scientists filled the gallery. Cameras weren't allowed, but every seat was taken. People had come from across the country to witness the day Langston Labs would finally face the truth. At the center of it all sat Zuri Thomas, now a symbol far greater than she ever intended to be. Next to her, Micah, her long-lost brother, looked small in the oversized blazer Amira had lent him. His eyes darted across the room, overwhelmed but determined. And on the other side of the aisle, Charles Langston, still clean-cut, still composed. But his hands trembled ever so slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks. His billion-dollar empire had crumbled in 6 weeks. The judge, an older black woman with gray curls and sharp eyes, entered the courtroom with quiet power. "Let the record show," she began, "that this hearing is for the purpose of reviewing evidence in the class action lawsuit against Langston Laboratories, represented by Mr. Charles Langston, in relation to unauthorized human experimentation, the unlawful detainment of minors, and the destruction of federal property and research safeguards." Langston's attorney stood, rambling something about misinformation and online hysteria. But the judge cut him off. "We have documents. We have medical records. We have whistleblower testimony. And now," she turned to the prosecution table, "we have the children." Zuri stood. Micah followed. Amira placed the emerald ring in the evidence tray. It was now cracked, but still glowing faintly, the embedded microchip exposed like a heart pulled from a machine. Zuri's voice didn't tremble. "My name is Zuri Thomas. I was part of a program called Project Apex, though I never signed up for it. I was a toddler when they ran experiments on me. My mother tried to stop them. She died because of it." She turned slightly toward Langston, meeting his eyes. She left me this ring, not for jewelry, but as a vault. Inside it, I found names, files, video footage, evidence that children like me, children of color, were used without consent, targeted because they didn't have the power to fight back. Zuri opened a folder. Exhibit B, video of Site 4, where my brother Micah was kept alone for over 2 years. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom as the footage played. Micah, scared and silent, in a dim room with nothing but a mattress and camera. Zuri closed the folder. That video went live. It reached 6.2 million viewers in the first 12 hours. You can't bury that. Charles Langston stood slowly. I did what I had to do, he said, to advance science, to protect national interest. These children weren't prisoners. They were pioneers. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Langston, is it your position that what we've seen today, including the medical injuries, psychological trauma, and buried compounds, was all part of acceptable advancement? Langston straightened his jacket. Progress has always come at a cost. Zuri's voice rose again. Then why were all your subjects poor? Black? Brown? Forgotten? Silence. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, signs raised, chants growing louder. Justice for the children. Langston must pay. Protect the next Zuri. The final ruling was delivered that afternoon. Langston was found liable for corporate negligence, human rights violations, and unlawful experimentation. The company was dissolved. Its remaining assets, including over $800 million in liquid cash, were ordered to be redirected toward a new independent foundation called the Zuri Initiative. It would fund scholarships, trauma recovery, and scientific programs for underprivileged youth, fully independent of government or private profit. 3 months later, Zuri stood in front of a glass building in Atlanta. On the wall was a mural, her silhouette with the words, "Fix the Future." Next to her, Micah held her hand. Uncle Jay and Aunt Rhea were there. So was Amira. And Malik, now healthy and back in print, took photos as the ribbon was cut. This place used to be a lab, Zuri said, her voice into the mic for the newscasters. A prison for kids who were told they were too different to matter. She turned to the crowd. Now it's a launch pad. Applause broke like thunder. Later that night, Zuri sat alone in the empty workshop behind the new center. She opened her hand. The ring, cracked but whole, still shimmered faintly. She spoke softly. "Hey, Mama, we did it." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't cry much anymore, but this one felt like a promise kept. 5 years later, the Zuri Initiative had funded over 4,000 children. Langston was serving a 25-year sentence without parole. Zuri, now 18, had just finished her second patent. She didn't go to Harvard or MIT. She built her own school, the Fixers Academy, where black brilliance wasn't a threat. It was the curriculum.